Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm Barry Coombs from Computerworld.
And I'm Anthony Charman from Computerworld.
So I think many of you have joined us because you were unable to join us at our VMworld seminar last week. I think it was last week. Time seems to fly by at the moment.
Just over a week ago now.
So what we wanted to do is try and put together a small recap as to what we covered at VMworld, at the VMworld event, and obviously what we saw at VMworld.
Yeah.
And we were just going to go through the various different elements. We had many speakers at the event. I think we had nearly 100 attendees come to our event.
Yep.
Significantly more at VMworld, and we'll speak about that a little bit later. But what we hope to be able to do in the next hour is just to give you an overview of where VMware's vision is, where the industry vision is, some of the things that maybe Computerworld are working on, and then subsequently to this, what we're looking to do is do a number of other webinars that are going to cover some of the technologies in a bit more detail. We're going to speak about some technologies that VMware are working on, like Evo Rails, also vSphere 6, and what we're hoping to do is do a number of webinars over the coming months to bring you fully up to date. And of course, if you'd like to speak to any of the Computerworld account managers, engineers, or anybody in my team, please just reach out to your Computerworld account manager. So what we're going to do, without any further ado, is just move on to some of the slides, and we're just going to talk around what we saw being discussed at VMworld itself. For me, this was my, I think it was my fourth VMworld now.
Yeah. So it was the second one for myself.
And I go every year because it gives me a really good opportunity to understand not only what VMware's vision is, but to interact with the community, the vendors and the other people there. What's generally your main reason for wanting to attend, Anthony?
Well, I've for the last 2 years I've hosted clients of ours over there. So if anyone who's listening to the podcast is interested in coming with us next year, we take a group out to Barcelona. We're able to get discounted rate tickets. And I would say, until you've been once, you don't really understand what it's all about. It's a bit of an assault on your senses. 8,000 or over 8,000 people this year in a conference centre, mostly technical people, and some fantastic content. Well worth going for, and I learned lots of lessons at the first time I went, which enabled me to really get the best out of a second visit this year.
So VMworld this year took place in two locations, San Francisco and Barcelona. San Francisco is always the biggest, had over 22,000 attendees. Barcelona over 8,000 attendees. So it's one of the largest attended virtualization or industry conferences out there. I think only beaten by the Oracle conference, which sounds like the most boring conference ever to me. but if you're into databases, then I'm sure that's the one to attend. And it's made up of a mixture of sessions, hands-on labs, where certainly if you're technical and you want to get some hands-on time with any of the latest products, the best thing you can do is go to VMworld and attend the hands-on labs, or any of you listening today or listening to the recording, what I recommend you do is go onto Google and search VMware hands-on labs. From that perspective, you can now sign up to the hands-on labs and use them in your own time. They cover all of the technologies from vSphere to Vue and things like that. So, and even Anthony, I think last year you got some time with some of the hands-on labs.
Yeah, I'm primarily in the business development side for Computerworld, but I've done a few of the labs and understand a bit of the tech there, and they're incredibly well put together and very, very useful sessions on. And you can pick which products you want to look at and look at it, in as much depth as you want.
And other than that, the availability to speak to the executives from VMware, being able to meet some of the people. One example is I'm one of the leaders for the Southwest UK VMware user group. And what we actually managed to do was sit down with the European CTO, Joe Bagley, and the CEO of VMware, Pat Gelsinger, for a kind of no-holds-barred session, ask whatever questions you want. And it was really good to be able to speak to those guys, understand what their vision for the industry was and where they were actually guiding VMware. And similar sessions were available throughout the conference. I think, Anthony, you managed to get in one when it comes to end-user computing.
Yeah, so I sit on the end-user computing user group, which is to provide feedback from the clients I work with who are deploying end-user computing solutions. And I think VMware just demonstrate every year that they are a company that listens to what people want to do and follow that lead and take that feedback very importantly.
So there were over 120 exhibitors there, and we'll be coming back to what some of the exhibitors were talking about a bit later. But there was also announcements over the whole product line, so across both the conferences Initially in San Francisco, we saw a lot of announcements around vSphere and vSphere 6 Beta, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. Slightly before that, there was lots of end-user computing announcements, and in Barcelona, there were lots of announcements around the monitoring product line, again, which we'll be going into in a little bit more detail. So as you're listening to us today, please feel free to use the question and answer facility, use the chat facility. We've also got a number of polls that we'll put up on screen to get some of your feedback as to where you are thinking you're going with strategy and what your thoughts are. So we know that you guys are all listening and there's someone on the other side of the camera. Please do ask us questions. We'll come through those as we can as we go through. So I always like to put up my holiday pictures when I go to Barcelona, not just to rub it in that I got to go to Barcelona, but for me it was the first time that I actually managed to spend some time looking around the city. Saw the beautiful fountains there playing Queen. There was some beer drunk by some of our customers and some of our sales guys.
Yes, yeah.
Maybe a bit too much beer at times.
A little bit too late at night as well.
Exactly. But the main thing for me was this kind of community atmosphere. We can see on the right-hand side of the screen there, the hands-on labs. And what this is showing here is a room with, I think it's around 500 stations, all connecting using VMware View and PC over IP to the cloud data centers. Now, all of those sessions are run from those data centers into Barcelona or San Francisco. So in terms of kind of VMware eating their own dog food, it shows they really believe in the technology, they're willing to put their neck on the line and utilize it. And the record numbers of people were taking these labs. In the top right, we saw a demonstration from Dell using the new virtual GPU technology that's due to be released in the new year by vSphere, in conjunction with some WiseThin clients and a VMware end-user computing stack on the back end. And end-user computing, as we're going to go into, is an element that is growing, that more and more people are starting to get into. And what we'll discover is end-user computing really is a lot more than just simply VDI. And in the bottom left, Anthony, there was some band that I didn't really know. What was the band that played?
Other than all the technical highlights for me, the seeing Simple Minds live for the first time since when I was about 18 at Warwick University, it was probably the highlight for me of the whole conference.
Unfortunately, I think I was too young. I think I knew one of the songs, and it's a typical technical conference. Even though there was a band there and lots of people were into it, you tended to watch it from the back of your iPhone screen. So yeah. I think it's the same every year, really. So what we wanted to talk about now, hopefully you'll be able to see it on screen, but we're going to kind of describe what is there, is a big part of VMworld is the solutions exchange. Being able to, being in a room year on year with all the industry top leaders, the vendors that are there selling solutions that surround the virtualization stack. And what's always interesting for me is seeing year on year whose stands got bigger, maybe smaller, or maybe didn't appear, and what is the general gist of what is going on at the event. Some of the things that really stood out for me this year were the increased growth in Flash and the relatively different ways of using it. So Flash is getting ever more affordable, and our use cases, whether it's applications or VDI or those other aspects, are requiring more and more performance and lower latency. We're seeing lots of interesting use cases. We're going to come into it in a little bit, but people like Nimble Storage, Pernix Data, and obviously Dell Compellent are all using Flash in slightly different ways. And I think a big part of this is being able to understand what's going to work for you. Anthony, what was your main takeaways from the solution exchange?
I think the main area that I noticed had increased a lot is to do with monitoring products for the VMware environment, be it your virtual server infrastructure, but probably more so the virtual desktop infrastructure. I think user experience is the key thing there. That's something that drives a lot of our VDI projects. That's where we start, because we could get away in the past with virtualizing our data center without the users being aware. But the moment we touch the desktop, it really does have a significant impact on them. So lots of new monitoring products around that area, and we'll be bringing some of those to market through Computerworld in the near future.
And I think the other aspect of those vendors that we see year on year, the likes of Veeam, they've just released version 8 of their backup product. They've also, in the last few days, released the first beta of their backup agent for laptops and things like that. Yes. So they now have the ability to protect physical machines in some extent. It'd be interesting to see where they go with that in the future. So the biggest part of the event, the part that anybody at home can tune into, are the keynotes. There was several keynotes at San Francisco and several keynotes over in Barcelona. And this is the opportunity for Pat Gelsinger, Kit Colbert, who is one of the team of CTOs, to talk around the relevant different areas of technology. When a lot of people are thinking about VMware, they are generally just talking about vSphere. They've got such a large product suite now, covering many different aspects, and some of the elements here really kind of show the direction where VMware are now going. And I think a key part of this is that the future is hybrid. No matter which way you want to be looking at it, in some way your data center is going to end up hybrid, being half of or some of your data center is going to be on-premise, and the rest of it is then going to end up being in the cloud. Now, whether you want to look at that as software as a service, I probably assume that most of you today are looking at software as a service, or whether you're going to be looked to consuming some other service, like putting some virtual machines in the cloud. A key element is the time is now to be thinking about how you want to do that. It's you as IT managers that will have to be leading this strategy. You're going to have to understand what will and what won't work for your business. And then from that perspective, take the brave decisions that what is right from a cloud technology. I think one of the things that I heard at VMworld that really kind of stuck with me was, are you part of the future or are you part of the furniture? And what IT managers do risk is if they just decide to ignore cloud, if they decide it's not for them, it will all of a sudden happen to them without them planning it, without it being strategically happening. It will be more cost effective. There will be other benefits. So what we really need to do is we need to be working to understand what is your cloud strategy. How are you going to be adopting cloud over the next few years? Now, what we're not saying is we're not sat here saying that you need to be moving all your virtual machines to the cloud today. We're saying you need to be aware. It might not be right for you today. There might be security and compliance issues. But there's many, many more ways now to be delivering cloud technologies in your data center. And what this means is we're going to start bringing together a number of different aspects. So today you've got traditional legacy applications. I think it was Brian Madden that said if there was a nuclear disaster, the only thing that would be left were your legacy applications and cockroaches. We're still going to need to support those traditional applications, and they won't work as software as a service. You're going to probably want those in your data center or in a virtual machine that you can manage. So we can't have the traditional apps versus the cloud native apps. We can't any longer have IT versus developers. If you work in a company that has developers, developers will become your best friend as we're moving into this cloud era. We've got on-premise versus off-premise. Is it an either-or scenario? And then the most important thing for IT managers is the safe, secure and compliant versus being able to stay up to the speed of business and deliver IT in real time with instant, elastic and self-service. So what we need to be doing is bringing these elements together with the power of and. So all of these elements working together in combination to be able to deliver an IT strategy that will work for your business. We need to be considering the applications and your business use cases. We need to stop IT being the cost center that costs the business so much money, being the black hole, and change it into a way that it is able to be part of the business, part of that strategy, and building business cases as we're moving forward. That is going to be the key role for the IT managers and IT employees, administrators moving forward. And we've really got to make sure we're sticking into that. And from VMware's perspective, the way that they're gearing up from this is built up of a number of different different elements. We've got the private cloud element, which I assume most of you today are using technologies like vSphere inside your data center. And we then have technologies like VMware vCloud Air, which we're going to go on to, which is in the public cloud. And the power of that is bringing those together. But VMware is also bolstering things like vSphere with the vSAN technology, Evo Rails. They've got NSX, which is network virtualization. And this all comes together in the power of software-defined data center. We're not defining how any of these elements work on a physical component. If you're doing that, you're going to struggle to move it into the cloud in the future. I mean, if you look at how quickly you can roll out a virtual machine, that's very easy. But how quickly can you roll out a new VLAN or a new load balancer or configure policies on your storage device? We need to be bringing that all together so it's wrapped around those virtual machines. And then the other element, of course, is end-user computing is getting more and more complex. If we look at your estate that your users were using for work 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, they would generally be Office-based, Windows-based, using Microsoft applications. Today, they're going to be using a number of different applications. They're going to be using a number of different operating systems. And it doesn't really, it isn't right for IT any longer to be going, no, we do not support any other device. It has to be the device that has been put on your desk. IT needs to be more flexible. At the end of the day, if our business can be more profitable, by adopting some of these technologies, that is the right thing for the business, and we need to be working together on that. So VMware are doing a number of things to make sure they're not just the hypervisor company anymore. They are the people that are able to be there on your cloud journey. Now, one of those elements is the vRealize suite. The vRealize suite was also previously known as vCenter Operations and a number of other products. They've gone through a bit of a marketing mix-up, and I think someone's very ashamed by the name they've managed to come out with there. But the important aspect is the vRealize suite doesn't just allow you to monitor your own infrastructure, it also allows you to monitor infrastructures in the cloud. It allows you to monitor things like Hyper-V if you wanted to, Amazon Web Services, different applications like Exchange and SQL. We're bringing all of this together, and that's what really matters to you and your business. But there are also elements that allow you to compare services side by side. So when you're rolling out an application, you can make a decision as to, does it make sense for me to put this on-premise? Or maybe it would be better on Azure or vCloud Air. It's able to bring all those elements together. And for me, what was really surprising is VMware are now seen as the leader in cloud management. So Gartner and some other people have been able to identify what VMware is doing in more than just simply the VMware hypervisor stack, and they're now listed as the leader in that space, which is really kind of signaling where VMware are spending their efforts and where they want to be going forward.
I think one of the interesting things there is, I think, not this year, but the previous year, there was very little mention of cloud at VMworld. Just, it wasn't mentioned at all, and now we're in a place where their whole strategy is based around the hybrid cloud piece. And as you see from Gartner, they're in the lead in managing that.
Exactly, and from that perspective, as Anthony says, year on year it changed. That what they're working towards is being tuned. They've been readying themselves as the vendor to have the components to be able to do that cloud piece. They've now rolled out their own cloud solutions, plus giving you the tools to manage your cloud solutions, whoever you decide to go with. And that is really important.
I think one of the most impressive things I would say about VMware as a company, having seen them, worked with them, but also seen them 2 years running at VMworld, is the fact that year before last they were talking about things. They were talking about having acquired AirWatch, and now that's an integrated part of their strategy. They do move very, very quickly in integrating things into the organisation rather than just keeping them going as separate organisations and products.
That's it. And one of the biggest elements of that is obviously the end user computing. I think it's now the biggest area or biggest growing area inside VMware. And I think one of their products, Horizon Mirage, that many of you may not know about, is actually the largest growing product inside that division.
Yeah.
And when people think about VMware and they talk about end user computing, you might be thinking about technologies such as View and VDI. VMware realized some 18 months, 2 years ago now, that there was more to end user computing than simply putting your desktops in the virtual environment like you've done with your servers. And what they have now done is they've acquired a company, it was called Winova 2 years ago, and that brought the Winova product to their suite. And they brought out the Mirage product. From that perspective, that allows you to manage your physical PCs as if they were virtual desktops, but it works at a per block level. And what we're able to do is image machines from example XP to Windows 7 seamlessly. The user is able to sit there and continue to use it. When the user logs back on its Windows 7, their data is still there, their customizations are still there. But we've also, as Anthony said, we've seen AirWatch has been acquired. There's more to end-user computing than simply Windows desktops. We've got tablets that are now being managed for business and used for business purposes. Indeed, we seem to have gained a tablet on our reception desk at the moment that is used as a sign-in sheet. But from these perspectives, they're becoming used more and more, and we need ways to be able to manage it. And the other element is somebody managed to get Horizon Workspace working on a Tesla. So now VMware put a picture of a Tesla on every one of their slides. But the important thing is we need to make our employees being able to work in whatever environment suits them, allow the flexibility for them to log in multiple different locations with multiple different devices, but be able to get that same desktop feel, to be able to get to their data, get to their applications. The other element that we touched on briefly then is NSX. NSX is the network virtualization technology. And what this is currently aimed at is the larger data center customers or the medium to large enterprises. But what this allows you to do is automate and manage your networking components inside your virtual environment. So if you think about 8-9 years ago, where were the majority of ports inside your infrastructure and where did you have, that they were all physical ports that you were managing. If you look at your infrastructure today, you're likely to have more virtual network ports than you are physical ones. So the question should be asked, why are you doing things like load balancing, firewalls, all the other routing elements, why are they still being done with physical switches at the back of your cabinets? And then if you want to move those workloads into the cloud, how do you do that when all of those elements are managed by physical components? So this is where NSX comes in. It allows companies to be able to roll out new load balancers, firewalls, virtual environments, routing, all those kind of things in a matter of minutes from inside the virtualization stack, and it fully interacts with the switching upstream, like Dell Force 10 switching or Cisco switching. As we sit here today, it is generally aimed at the larger customers, but we can only assume where this may come in the next 2 to 3 years, and that everybody should be able to have the benefit from the network virtualization. So what we did at our event last week in Bristol is we had a spot called 5-5. And what that allowed our 5 vendors to do is have 5 minutes to talk about their product, what really stood out for them. And then from that perspective, if they rolled over the 5 minutes, we kicked them off stage. It meant that we were able to get everyone's opinion, everyone's thoughts quickly. Anthony, from your perspective, which one of these stood out for you? What was the best 5-5 slot for you?
I think the Nimble Storage one was probably the one that was probably the most complete one. I mean, some people like Dell finished very early and had a long space, even though they have a lot to talk about at the moment. Nimble just took us through the whole of the journey. There's a very disruptive technology. I don't know if people who are listening and watching have looked at Nimble at all, but it's just a very, very clever product in the way in which it makes use of flash and SSD type storage alongside traditional SATA or nearline SAS storage to just give blistering performance at very reasonable costs, and especially very reasonable costs when we're starting to increase the size and performance of these units. So really, it was Nimble who were the ones who had the most, impressed me the most in that pitch. It's also very interesting to see salespeople trying to do that elevator pitch. From a business development point of view, myself, I don't think I'd like to try and pitch us in 5 minutes, but they had a good go, some of these guys, and some of them fell flat on the face, but others were very impressive.
I think Nick had clearly been standing in front of the bathroom mirror, had been practicing to the 10th degree. I think he finished with seconds left. Yeah. I did feel very sorry for Azim at Veeam. So Veeam have got a lot of going on at the moment. As we mentioned, V8 has just been released. We sprung this on him the morning he got to there, and unfortunately got kicked off the stage. Some of the other elements for me, I mean, certainly Dell. I mean, if we have been speaking to you about Dell in the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, they've really had one storage technology that they're talking about. That was Dell Equilogic. Compellent has then obviously come around since then. But what we've really seen is Dell is really embracing this element of customer choice. What we're seeing is bigger choice than ever available, and there's so many different ways for you to be deploying your virtual environments. Obviously, we've got the standard sort of server and storage design where the Equilogic fits in very well. But we're seeing an increase in what's called hyperconvergence, bringing this all together into a smaller amount of boxes. And they're one of the first VMware EvoRails customers, and we'll come into EvoRail a bit later. But they've also partnered with Nutanix, who again have a hyperconverged technology that allows you to grow individual building blocks at a time, increasing not only performance on compute and disk capacity as well at the same time. We then had Bitdefender from a protection standpoint, allowing you to integrate fully with the VMware vShield endpoint and scan your virtual machines underneath the virtual machine level. So instead of deploying an agent into each of your virtual machines, it is working alongside the hypervisor to scan the traffic that is going into your virtual machines prior to it causing a problem. And from my perspective, that has 2 benefits. The first is reducing the load on your virtual environment, and secondly, if we can stop the virus getting to your Windows machine, it makes the environment secure in general. So from that perspective, certainly in VDI, we've seen that as a key element to be able to reduce the overhead by the antivirus and get more users per box to really make that investment better.
I think that's an important point, and we were doing a lot of large VDI deployments at the moment. And Bitdefender is not a name that many people know, but if you have a look at their technology and the way in which they do it, it just works sorry, stealing one of VMware's, Veeam's strap lines there. It does work. It's got a much lower overhead on the VDI machines than we would traditionally see with Symantec and Sophos and their vShield applications. And it's well worth looking at because it's very, very competitively priced again.
And the final sponsor from our perspective was Pernix Data. And again, this is where it comes down into choice and being able to deliver your technology in so many different ways and being able to understand what works for your business. So Pernix Data will make use of local SSDs in each of your hosts or additional memory in each of your hosts to be able to accelerate the reads and the writes to your storage. So maybe you've got a performance issue with your current storage device, or maybe you're looking to buy a new storage device and you want to separate that performance from the capacity. Pernix Data is able to integrate directly with VMware to deliver that performance directly on each local host and then deliver the capacity, the data protection from your existing SANs that you've already invested a lot of money in. So a lot of interesting technologies at the moment, and I think we were very well represented by the sponsors that we had. So we came on to an element now where VMware was doing some speaking slots for us, and we were joined by Justin Oliver, or Olivia, who is one of the vCloud Air engineers working for VMware in the UK. What VMware vCloud Air does is it allows you to extend your existing on-premise vSphere infrastructure into the cloud. Now, VMware do this in a very different way to the likes of Amazon or Azure. They will give you the name and the address of the data center where your data is going to be located. You sign up for a contract with a data center. So from that perspective, you will know that your data is going to be in Bracknell, or your data is going to be in Chessington, or Germany, or America. You decide where that's going to be. So you don't have to worry, first of all, where your data is going to be located. Now, second of all, it fully integrates with your on-premise virtualization infrastructure. So from that perspective, you can have your existing virtual infrastructure and the cloud infrastructure and move your virtual machines into the cloud and then back again seamlessly. A lot of these technologies have very easy ways to move your virtual machines into the cloud, but it's not so easy to move them back. And because it all runs on the same technology, I think as long as you're over vSphere 4.1, you can integrate your existing environment into the cloud.
I think when people see that is actually the resource that they're renting in the cloud appears in their vCenter and is there for them to move VMs to and back from, as often, or as often as they want, then it's a very, very different proposition to Azure and Amazon's offerings, where I think VMware coined this kind of Hotel California style of cloud, where once you've checked in a VM into their cloud, it's very, very difficult to get out again. So yeah, I mean, I'm certainly talking to a lot of clients at the moment. We've got a big meeting in London tomorrow with a major client to look at how they can take advantage of these data center extensions, which is the best way to explain what vCloud Air is.
Definitely, and it's your infrastructure. We can spread your VLANs from your existing infrastructure into the cloud. You don't have to do separate layer 3 routing if you don't want to. But we can also have a number of different use cases. So the first, most obvious one, maybe you're doing a large amount of tests and development. Maybe you've got something that strategically needs to be rolled out very quickly. You can obviously move those elements into the cloud and then bring them back on premise when the time is right. But we also have DR as a service. So if you are an organisation that doesn't have a secondary site, or it's not feasible for you to have a second infrastructure within your business, you are able to replicate at a per virtual machine level your virtual machines from on-premise into vCloud Air. And what you're then just paying is effectively an insurance fee, a premium, to be able to roll up those virtual machines in the event of a failure. But what you also get baked into that is a number of DR tests a year, and the ability to grow that environment should you ever need to. We also have VDI as a service, desktop as a service. So if you would like a number of VDI desktops, they could now be located in the cloud. And again, it will all integrate with your on-premise environment. So I know Anthony's been working with a number of customers on vCloud Air. What is the main benefit that they are seeing after they've gone through their trials?
I think it is one of those things you need to look at and understand before you actually understand the best place to way to apply it to your business. One of my clients is an organisation that offers software as a service retail systems to people like Cath Kidston. They actually do it for the Royal Palaces, and they are offering that kind of service. And when they first looked at it, they thought it'd use it as a straight data center extension. But what they've realised is for each of their clients, they can purchase an online data center, put their applications in there, let them have access to it, and then they will have a predictable charge model against it because they know what their monthly costs are to VMware for that compute resource, and then they can add their margin and charge that onto the client. So that was not where we started with that project. That was just that when they looked at it, they realised that was a great solution to overcome their big issue with how much they charge their clients for their infrastructure.
And from that perspective, I think what is quite apparent with it is you can take baby steps. It isn't an all or nothing kind of approach. We can kind of just start small, see how it works. If it isn't for you now, then simply you cancel it. I think, is it a 3-month initial term that you could go with and then dial it back from there?
So if as long as we can put a nice business case to the vCloud Air team at VMware to say that you're taking this seriously, you've got some a plan of what you're going to use the resource for, and you've got some acceptance criteria, and you're serious about it, then they'll give you a month's free in that environment for a bit of a proof of concept before they start charging you, and there's a minimum 3-month contract with vCloud Air. However, if within the first month you realise it's not going to work, they'll cancel the 3-month contract and you can move on from there. So if you've got situations you're thinking about, or you just want to try it and we can put together a nice business case for it and some acceptance criteria, then we can try it for free, in effect.
So we've got a little poll to go on screen now. I just wanted to understand, prior to today, were you aware of vCloud Air? Was it something you looked at and knew what VMware had to offer there? So I'll just leave that on screen for a few seconds to let you all reply. So it's good. It appears people are starting to become aware of it, maybe about a 50-50. Slightly more people know than yes. And I think it is really different to all the other cloud propositions out there. Cloud has been something that's been very scary. It's going to mean that you've had to put your neck on the line previously, whereas I think now it is something that is just more accessible. VMware are making that more accessible. It's something that you can easily understand. It's something that you can be a bit more confident in putting your virtual machines in there. So that's really good. And thank you ever so much for your feedback. That's really good to kind of know where we are with that.
I would say that, there was a slide earlier that Barry had up, which was only the brave will survive. I've sat in front of 2 or 3 IT managers recently who have, when I've mentioned cloud, they've said, oh, I don't, I see that as a big threat to my job. I want my kit on my premises. I want to be managing that. I don't want someone to take that all away from me. However, when you start to investigate what vCloud Air does, and I've done this with a couple of these guys, they realise that this is the way forward. This is an easy way to test where cloud fits within their organisation, and I'd thoroughly recommend that you take a look at it.
Fantastic. So we're going to move on now to end user computing. And one of the obvious things for me is obviously XP became end of life earlier on this year. And we're still seeing a lot of people using that technology. So I'd really like to understand from the people that are watching today, how many of you have already transitioned away from XP? How many of you are still looking at doing that? And how many of you have managed to get away? And what we're seeing is quite a lot of people doing that. But the obvious thing is the XP migration or moving away from XP came up all of a sudden. People kind of weren't expecting it and then started panicking last minute. I think we've seen government organisations pay multi-million-pound contracts just to continue to extend that life cycle of support from Microsoft. And I think the important thing is not the fact that Microsoft aren't going to be supporting that anymore, but a lot of the antivirus vendors are now stopping to support XP. And that's where things will start to get a little bit more worrying. But Windows 7 is going to be the next thing that's creeping up on us. And Microsoft has said they're not going to start expanding or extending those life cycles again and again and again. What is there now is going to be what is stuck to. So what is obvious is we need to be able to deliver a end-user computing strategy that is more than just give somebody a PC, upgrade it if it comes back in with a problem. Yeah. I mean, we've been doing some VDI projects over the coming past year, and we've seen people out there with 1,600 different applications in an organisation. We've seen people out there with over 70 copies of Office, if that's even possible, going all the way back to Office XP up to Office 2013, but they're very many different iterations. And if you manage the overhead from a support perspective, trying to support your users with all these variety of applications without any strategy for how we keep them up to date, that's where that becomes very difficult. So an end user computing strategy needs to have many different elements. Of course, we've got VDI, we mentioned Mirage earlier, but what is important is we have the ability to manage those devices. We have the ability to get applications down to those devices quickly, to keep them updated. I mean, lots of your users are kind of probably now consuming iPads and Android tablets at home. They're used to going to an app store and downloading an application. But why does it take 2 weeks for IT to get a new application onto my machine? It's going past the stage now where that kind of level of support is going to be acceptable.
And one of the things we did at the event was get one of our clients, Steve Maxwell from DAS Insurance Group, up onto the stage just to really talk about the journey we've taken them through in moving from an unmanaged desktop environment to a managed desktop environment, and that has been through deploying a combination of VMware View alongside the Mirage products. And he was saying the effect that it's had on his support desk and the reduction in the number of calls, and knowing that there's only one version of Adobe out there in his desktop environment being run, one standard version of Office out there, rather than, I can't remember how many we found when we did the original desktop assessment.
A large number,
yeah. Yeah, a large number of them, has just reduced the help desk calls significantly. And he had a department within his organisation who wanted to use Microsoft Project recently, and it took him 6 minutes to roll it out to the 25 plus users in that department, and they were absolutely astounded by that. So it's been, it's a painful thing to go through. The real driver for that project was to get rid of the XP from their organisation for financial compliance reasons. But the benefits on top of that, and certainly the benefits that when we next move the desktop, the operating system platform, are absolutely phenomenal.
Definitely. And there's obviously another element of that. I mean, obviously, we spoke about there an organisation that is using VDI, but also using physical devices. And that's what we're seeing. Again, it's hybrid, using both of those different types of devices. They're using VMware View or Horizon View and Horizon Mirage. But we've got a number of benefits for both technologies. So obviously with View, being able to give your users a VDI desktop means that they can use any desktop anywhere and get the same experience, get the same applications. We're seeing a lot of people in kind of medical organisations, hospitals and things like that. Being able to get to that data quickly, no matter where they are in the business, is important for them. Maybe you have a specific role within your organisation. If you can connect to that same desktop in multiple locations, that could give you a real benefit. I mean, certainly Computerworld has had a lot of free time from me from whilst I'm sat at home using my iPad to upgrade our VMware environments and things like that. If you enable your employees, they will be able to use the technology, and that will then be rewarding for the business. It's all around building that business case to be able to show what the worth is to the business rather than just the capital expenditure. And the other element is obviously Mirage. So as I mentioned, Mirage is a block level tool. You can image your machines at a block level. It only changes the blocks that have changed. Even between XP and Windows 7, we're able to see the blocks that have changed and then simply send it down. So if you compare that to something like SCCM, maybe you're trying to send a 40 gigabyte image down. With Mirage, you might only need to send 3 to 4 gigabytes of data. We've recently worked with a customer where they had some laptops to update in Canada. They were based in Bristol, and we were able to update those machines from XP to Windows 7 whilst the users were still using it over effectively what was a 2 meg MPLS line. So it gives you freedom to be able to do those updates when they're needed to be done to keep it up to date, and also then to be able to deliver new applications as a different layer, maybe upgrading to Windows 8 in the future. But another important aspect is if they lose that device, if that device dies, how do you get their data back? How do you get them back working? Now, we obviously all tell our employees that they should save everything to the network share, but I'm possibly the worst person. I think I've got 487 files on my desktop at the moment. It's something we all do, and what Mirage does is it actually trickles back the changes the user is making back to a massive deduplication repository at the back end that's run on a NAS or something like that. And that means that we can restore that user's image, including their data, up to maybe the last hour ago at any given time to any device. It doesn't have to be the same device. So while we were talking around that, I put a poll on the screen around VDI, and I think over 3/4 of you are currently considering VDI in the next 3 years. And some of those aspects that are making this more affordable now are the technology like vSAN from VMware, Nimble, as Anthony mentioned at the start. And what we're seeing over the last 2 to 3 years is previously VDI has been very expensive. It's been cost prohibitive. We haven't been able to afford to do it. What we're now able to do, because those costs are coming down, we're able to make it more cost neutral. But working with the account managers like Anthony at Computerworld, we're able to help you build that business case.
I would say another one of the very early VDI deployments we did was for Ginsters. Ginsters manufacture a large number of pasties just over the border into Cornwall. They have about 20 distribution depots that they ship their pasties out to, which is then go through their van delivery service out to the supermarket, the smaller supermarkets and the petrol stations. Each of those distribution points had a couple of PCs and a printer, but they were employing somebody to travel around between all of those, maintaining them almost on a full-time basis, doing break-fix repairs and just general maintenance. Through deploying, what was quite a small VDI solution there. At the time, we were able to push out a VDI desktop, so the desktop sat in their data centre down in Callington in Cornwall. It could be maintained there, and all that was being pushed out to the units where with the screens and the keystrokes and mouse movers were coming back, and that just meant it was very, very easy to maintain those thin clients at the far end. They bought a couple of spare ones. If one went wrong, they stuck it on the lorry. And therefore, the business case for that was very, very simple. We took a person who was out on the road, using petrol and a car, brought them back into the IT department where they were more useful, and saved money in the process to justify the project.
Definitely. And the important aspect here is what we want to be changing IT departments to be is being proactive rather than reactive. I see far too many IT departments that are still getting caught up with kind of business as usual by looking at help desk tickets for things that could easily be solved if you had the ability to be able to put some better systems in place. Being able to effectively manage the desktop environment, being able to effectively manage what's going on with your servers is an important aspect. And certainly what the cloud does, what the cloud allows us to do, is it allows us to have the same infrastructure that your largest competitor is. There's no difference. So what we need to do is understand which parts of this technology will work for you, what fits for you, and what is your strategy for getting from where you are today to where you need to be. It isn't going to be something that is going to happen in the next few months. This is a strategy that is going to take you over the next few years. So one of the elements that I just want to come on to now, one of the last elements that we're just going to wrap up on in the last 15 minutes, is VMware vSphere 6 and also EvoRails. So in San Francisco VMworld, vSphere 6 was announced. It's currently a public beta, and that's very different for VMware. Normally, only like the vExperts and the large customers will get access to the beta technology, so you get an understanding of what's going to happen prior to it being production ready. What VMware have done for amongst the first time is they've actually made this available to everybody. So anybody watching today or watching the recording can go to the link that's on screen, and you can sign up to be part of that beta. You can install it on some test equipment inside your data center, or maybe what I would say is, even if you can't do that, read the documentation, understand what's coming in vSphere 6 and maybe how it's going to work for you. There's a number of new technologies in that. So we've seen fault tolerance was a technology that was introduced in vSphere 4. What this allows you to do is actually effectively run a virtual machine in lockstep on 2 hosts. That meant if one of the ESX hosts died, the other virtual machine would take up the workload with zero downtime to the applications and the virtual machines that are being protected by fault tolerance. The main problem with the limitations in the way that it worked, you could only do it with virtual machines that had one virtual CPU. You couldn't take snapshots, and there were a number of other technologies. What VMware are now doing is they're allowing that to work for multiple CPUs. They're also improving the architecture, where effectively there will be 2 virtual machine VMDKs on either of the hosts. That will allow you to do it over higher latency, larger spread out workloads and things like that. We've also got improvements in HA and storage fault tolerance. So high availability is the ability for one of the hosts to go down in your infrastructure. The VMs will go down unless they're protected with fault tolerance, but then they will reboot on another host in the cluster. The only situation that they were aware of previously is if the host died or if it was isolated from the network. If you lost connectivity to your storage from one of your hosts, the virtual machines would die, but they wouldn't reboot. What VMware are now doing is they're building into HA this all passed down knowledge, so they're able to move the virtual machines if there's been a mass storage connectivity failure. We've got improvements with things like IOPS reservation, enhanced storage, DRS. We've got a new technology that will allow us to vMotion between multiple vCenters, or maybe even multiple data centers, depending on your architecture. The vCenter Linux appliance is now also exactly the same in terms of scalability as the Windows one. I think this is something moving forward we're likely to see improvements on, and VMware focusing on just the Linux appliance. I don't know this, but I think that's the way that it's likely to go. It makes sense. If that Linux appliance could be robust and scalable, it's easier to deploy. You can deploy it in a couple of minutes in comparison to maybe an hour, hour and a half for the Windows one. The web console is a sticking point for many VMware administrators. VMware have been pushing it for a long time now. They said vSphere 5 was going to be the last iteration where the old C client was available, but what they've actually done is they've now agreed to extend the C client into version 6. But any of the features and functionality that have been introduced since the web client has been the main platform for them are only going to be able to be edited in the web console. So they're further improving the usability of that. They're making it quicker than before. So I think we're getting to a place now where you should be using the web console on a daily basis. Certainly as a Mac user myself, it's now my default administrative console. We've got an element called the content library, and what that will allow us to do is take templates and ISOs and be able to roll protection around them, allow you to move them between data centers and things like that. Previously, ISOs and templates have really been this second-class citizen. They've been something you can't really manage and maintain. The other element, which is a really big element, is VVols, virtual volumes. Now, Nick Dyer from Nimble spoke to us quite a lot, quite extensively about virtual volumes, and I really urge you to see if you can check out one of his sessions. He presented at VMworld, as well as the UK VMUG, and you'll probably find one of his sessions online. But what VVols allows you to do is it allows you to take the software-defined element of the storage that you might get from something like EVO Rails or vSAN and apply that to your physical storage device. So if you're running an Equilogic or a Nimble array or something like that, what we're able to do is set the policies at the VMware level, like how often is it going to snapshot, what is the replication statistics, what tier of storage does it need to be on, and at the back end, each of your virtual machines will effectively be provisioned on their own volume, their own element of storage. So instead of you having to carve up multiple VMFS volumes, and say I'm going to put 10 virtual machines on this and they're all going to be snapshotted to this schedule and replicated from A to B, we deal with all of those elements inside VMware, with the storage vendors then working with VMware to allow this integration in the form of virtual volumes. It's a very complex subject, it's implemented in a number of different ways, and we believe it's going to be available at Enterprise Plus initially, with VMFS still being supported across the board. What you're probably going to do is choose your most important workloads, and from that perspective you will use VVols for those workloads. So I urge you to go and read up a little bit more about that, or speak to us at Computerworld if you'd like a deeper dive with VVols. So we now come on to EvoRel, and VMware have introduced EvoRel again at San Francisco. And what EvoRel is it's a package of hardware and software. You can buy EvoRel from many of the different server OEMs. So for example, you can buy it from Dell, HP, you can also buy it from Supermicro. You're also able to buy it from the likes of EMC and Hitachi. From that perspective, what is contained in an EvoRel appliance is 4 ESXi nodes. Inside there you get 12 cores and 192 gigabytes of RAM per node, and you get 6.55 terabytes usable space over the appliance. It's managed in such a way that you can get it out of the box to have it running with your virtual machines on it within 15 minutes. And at our seminar we did a demonstration showing how simple that was. It uses a brand new HTML5 interface that allows you to quickly go through and check the configuration and click go. It will then deploy the vCenter for you. It rolls out LoginSite. It will roll out VMware Enterprise Plus, which is included within the package. and you are then able to roll out and maintain your virtual machines through a standard vCenter interface or continuing to use the EvoRail interface. What you're also able to do is, as your environment needs to grow, maybe you're using it for VDI or server workloads, you're able to add up to 4 EvoRail appliances together in a group. When you add that second appliance, what happens is the first one will detect that another one has been plugged onto the network. It uses Apple Bonjour or services of similar to that VMware have customized to detect that using a service called Loudmouth. And from that perspective, it will then automatically configure the next appliance for you, so your capacity and your performance is then going to be expanded along with your compute. So this is something that is really different. From an administration perspective, we've got a very simple, clean interface, very good for branch offices and things like that. We've got 4 ESX hosts contained within the first one, and we can grow that up to 16 ESX hosts made up of 4 appliances. And we're also getting the full software-defined data center software license. We're getting that Enterprise Plus, so we can get the full benefits of the complete VMware stack. This is something that I think is really going to take off. It's interesting. I think this is the way that we're looking to be consuming our VMware environments in the future. It's not going to be for everyone today due to the cost and the limitations that we have to buy Enterprise Plus on those 4 hosts, but it's certainly very interesting for things like VDI workloads. VMware have also announced, I think in Barcelona, that they're looking to bring out something called Evo Rack as well. So if you're a very big organization, you're going to be able to effectively buy a 42U rack with all the components from top to bottom configured using the Evo Rack interface, using VMware NSX, with all the networking that will be ready to go. So it's something to watch out for. If you'd like more information, ask Computerworld. We'll also be putting some videos and doing a webinar on EvoRail in the coming weeks. So as we get to the end, if there are any questions, please put them up in the chat window now. For me, what is the most important aspect is we're in a fundamental change within IT at the moment. Over the next few years, we are going to see many different aspects changing. We're going to see cloud and software as a service taking over more of our infrastructure. And as IT managers, we need to be on the forefront of that. We need to be working with our business, understanding where the cloud fits for us, where the technology works. What do we need to do to be proactive rather than reactive? Can we make our life easier by implementing technologies that are going to be simpler to manage? Do we need to be considering our end-user computing strategy? And that doesn't have to be VDI, that can be more than just that. Anthony, from your perspective, what do you think is the kind of final thoughts from VMworld and the seminar?
I think probably the big thing really is to get your head around hybrid cloud. I think that will change the next 2 or 3 years. That will change the way in which you're deploying services, and certainly how that integrates with your existing kind of on-premise environment, but also how it integrates with software as a service offerings is something you just need to get your head around it before your managing director or your chief exec has read an article in the Times and comes in and asks you why you're not doing it. I think we look at things like EvoRail, and it all looks very big at the moment. And some of the other technologies you look at, you think, well, that's just beyond what I'm trying to do at the moment. What I would say with VMware, we've seen this time and time again. What comes in at Enterprise Plus level then rolls down through the stack and appears in Essentials Plus. And we know that you'll be taking advantage of some of that functionality, which maybe seems out of reach now in the solutions that you're putting together. I would also say, it's VMware are just an impressive organisation when it comes to, just setting the strategy and then delivering on that strategy. People like Barry, who's a VMware expert and gets an insight into what's coming next, are good people to be working with. And I think our clients as a whole benefit from having access to Barry and knowing someone who knows what's coming in the future and helping them to put together the solutions they want to deliver today. So they're my kind of final thoughts.
Brilliant. So thank you very much for joining in today. I hope you found it useful. If you'd like to speak to anybody at Computerworld, one of the architects or account managers, please just reach out to us and we can arrange one-to-one meetings or discussions to talk about your strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.